ओ नमस्ते व्यतिराजाय विवेकानंद सूरये सच्चित् सुख स्वरूपाय स्वामिने तापहारिणे. We were discussing about the concentration of mind, how the mind can be concentrated using prana. The word used here is prana, which is not exactly breath. That's what we discussed. That prana is not exactly breath. It is the name for all the energy that is in the universe. So whatever we see in this universe, whatever moves or works or has life in a human being or any other living being is a manifestation of this prana. It is, of course, the prana is there also in the inanimate objects, the atoms, the molecules. So the whole universe is made of a material part which is known as akasha, and the other one is prana. So prana acts upon akasha and causes prakriti to manifest itself in various ways. And Purusha or Brahman is the witness of that prakriti, or is the consciousness behind the prakriti. It animates the prakriti. And prakriti acts in the universe by the manifestation of this prana. So whatever energy you see in whichever form, whether it is light energy, magnetic energy, the life energy, nervous energy, and also a finer energy which is known as thought energy. We are playing with that energy or playing with that prana without knowing it. And that prana is known as our nervous energy. So our autonomous nervous system and the voluntary nervous system, the system which works using our sense organs and also works with the help of our spinal cord and the brain, the whole nervous system, which works in an autonomous way as well. There are many functions which we are doing autonomously. You don't have to think. You don't have to uh, tell the heart to beat. You don't have to tell the stomach to digest. There are many functions which many pranas which have become automatic with us. They are born when we are born and they die when the prana leaves the body. That is why in India, you don't say body is dead. You say the body, prana has left the body. Annamaya kosha is, as long as it is animated by the prana, it works, it functions. The heart beats, the blood circulates, the digestion takes place, the breathing takes place. You breathe, lungs pump, the breath is continuously going in and going out. Oxygen goes in and we absorb the oxygen and throw out carbon dioxide. So that is also one prana that is known as, but that is the mukhya prana, that is the sum total of all the pranas. That is different, but there is a specific prana which deals with the breathing. So here, by throwing out and restraining the breath, we are handling, in fact, one particular prana. That is what is meant. But in a general way, the coming in, restraining and throwing out of breath is by manipulating one of these five pranas which animates our body, we are manipulating the other ones. That is a very important point to remember. So the sum total of energy which animates our body, which is known as prana, one of the pranas, prana, apana, samana, vyana, and udana. So all these different pranas have different functions, but the main function, or maybe the function which can be controlled easily by us. We can't control our heartbeat. We can't control directly. Yogis can, of course, do as Thakur used to do. He could stop the prana at will, and he used to go into samadhi. That means his prana was under his control, and the prana no longer functioned, and just the Udana Vayu remained a little bit to come back, because he needs to come back and prana has to again animate his body. But when he went into samadhi, apparently he had so much control over his prana that all the functions of the body, including the beating of the heart, everything stopped. He could make the prana suspend itself and stop from animating the body. He could detach the pranamaya kosha with the annamaya kosha for the time being, for when he was in samadhi. But he had that strange capacity to again resuscitate the prana. I mean, he could start it. He could start the prana again, and all the functions would come back to normal. So this was a phenomena which Dr. Sarkar could not understand. He said, how can a person who is apparently, medically speaking, dead revive and come back, and all the functions start? The heart starts beating, the breathing starts, everything was suspended, as it were, in samadhi. But then he could bring it back. So this control of prana is what the yogis aim. So in samadhi, if we want to have absolute concentration or samadhi, then we have to start with the control of breath, because that is the most external prana, or the prana which can be controlled voluntarily. Others have become autonomous, in the sense all the other four pranas, including the udana, vyana, nervous energy, they are uh, partly, you can say, they are. All of you can hear me?
Yes, Maharaj.
Okay, fine. So you can control all the 4-5 pranas which are controlling our body by controlling, restraining breath. But Swamiji goes in a general way. He says not only can you control the prana, the 5 pranas which animate your body, but you can control the prana of the universe. That is why these prophets, when they start controlling their prana, they begin with controlling their prana. The yogis start with controlling their prana, then they can control all the 5 pranas in their body. They can do everything at will, and then as a logical conclusion, they can control the entire prana of the universe. So this sum total of energy that is displayed in the universe, the Ishvara or the avatar, the Ishvara, when when we say Ishvara, he is the universal being, he is the macrocosm, the sum total of all the minds, the sum total of all the pranas of the universe. So when the cycle begins, in the macrocosm, when we call the cycle begins, the creation begins, then the prana manifests itself in different ways, through plants, through animals, through inanimate beings, and through human beings. So this energy that is displayed in the prana acts upon the akasha, and the prana begins to manifest itself. It is this prana that is manifested as motion, whether it is nervous motion in the human beings or animals. The same prana is manifesting as thought energy, because that is also a prana. It is a very subtle prana which animates and which creates thoughts. So thoughts are just finer matter. Just as we can manipulate matter, we can manipulate thoughts. So your thoughts, just as the heat produced, a fire produced in a room can heat the entire room, so also your thoughts can go on expanding and expanding and expanding and influence other thoughts in the universe, because that is also prana. So consciously or unconsciously, our thoughts are influencing others, and we are getting influenced by other thoughts. Just as one prana of one, that is why this pranic healing and all the healing techniques which are there, they use this particular technique. When the prana of a particular person, they strengthen that prana and use that prana to cure the illness, the deficiency in prana of some other unhealthy individual. That is possible, but then yogis are advised not to do it, because we have a limited quantity of prana at our disposal. If we don't conserve it, and use it for spiritual development, then we will be wasting it in gross things. So that is why they say these miracles and all this healing and other techniques can be harmful to the person. And Swami Vivekananda, if you remember, tried to uh, touch Swami Abhedananda and try to transfer some of this prana to him. And as a result, Sri Ramakrishna admonished him, is, what are you doing? You have not yourself gathered spiritual power. First gather spiritual power, then you can distribute it at will. If you are connected to the source of infinite prana with Ishvara, with God, then you will never fall short of that prana, and then you can distribute at will. That is what Swami Vivekananda was told by Sri Ramakrishna. He said, first accumulate power in silence, just meditate, try to have control over your own prana, and when you have reached a certain stage where you can start influencing or start using that prana for the benefit of humanity, you do it. Don't be in a hurry to distribute it. That is why Swami Vivekananda, when he came back from America, and he said, for the last 4 years, I've been traveling so much all over, crisscrossing America, and the spiritual power that I had accumulated was perhaps spent a lot. So he said, I just want to go into silence for some time, conserve my energy, conserve my prana, and then come back and distribute that prana or that spiritual energy to others. So that prana which we see as motion externally, that energy, the same energy is also manifesting itself as the nervous energy, the nervous motion, the fine energy which creates reactions in us, which creates reactions on other people. The reactive mind, if we see, the reactive mind is nothing but the manifestation of this nervous energy. If we are very nervous people, if we are people who are agitated at the slightest stimulus from outside, then we say that our nervous energy is not under our control. Somebody gets angry on us, transfers that anger on our minds, and our minds immediately start reacting. It reacts. This nervous energy has a tendency to react. It resonates with the surrounding energy. That is why they say, when you go into evil company, or when you go into certain places where there is a tendency to pull your mind down, the reactive mind suffers. So you have to replenish or recharge your batteries, as it were. When you go to satsang, you tend to charge your nervous energy by being in company of these great souls. That's why Swami Vivekananda says that's the necessity of a guru, or the necessity of holy company, satsang. So Sri Ramakrishna used to emphasize and tell his disciples, you should come now and then, you should come here. It's not enough if you gather knowledge through books. There is a way where this energy can directly be conveyed. This thought energy can be transferred, and nervous energy also gets exchanged. Just as we exchange heat energy or light energy, it can be transferred from one place to another, or one object to another. Similarly, the whole universe, Swamiji says, is a combination of all these energies, complex energies, which animate the whole universe. The nervous energy, the physical energy, the light energy, the thought energy, and there are so many pranas. This whole universe is a vibration, as it were. The prana is vibrating in the. So when we tune ourselves to our Ishta, to one who is one with the cosmic mind, when we say Ishta, he is a manifestation of Brahman. His prana is at the highest level, the cosmic prana of an avatara or of a god whom we worship. So we actually are in touch, or we are in contact with that prana, which is a unending source of prana. It always replenishes our prana. Whenever we are tired or whenever our prana becomes weak, all we have to do is pray or connect ourselves with this infinite storehouse of prana, which is the Ishvara. That is the logic behind this pranayama. That what exactly do we do? What exactly does a yogi do when he starts breathing? He connects his individual prana, which is animating his body. He starts with breath, but it should not end with breath. Every pranayama or every breath that you take harmonizes the entire prana in your body. Then it fine tunes in such a way that it is tuned to the universal prana. And then you say the grace of God flows. Grace of God is nothing but tuning your prana to the universal prana of the Ishta, because his prana is uh, unlimited in scope. It is a storehouse of infinite power, infinite mercy, infinite grace. All the limitations that an individual has can be overcome by just connecting ourselves. But the problem is that connection does not take place. We are skeptical, we doubt, we don't have faith. We don't have faith because the Guru, when he gives the mantra, the mantra is an excellent way, as Sri Ramakrishna used to say. There are different links in a long chain. Now, each link, each mantra is like a link. She used to give such wonderful examples. In the sea, there is a huge log. You are floating in the sea, and you can't see the log. You have to just catch hold of one link, then catch hold of another link, catch hold of another link, and slowly move towards where the link takes you. So each link is connected to the other link, and finally, through the grace of God, the log, you reach the log, and then you are safe. So that is how we are connected to our Ishta through the japa. If you remember this fact and practice not only pranayama, pranayama becomes automatic when you repeat japa. That's what they say. You don't have to practice pranayama separately, because every rhythmic repetition of the mantra or the prayer or any practice that you do in a rhythmic way will result in a regular pattern of breathing. So by restraining and throwing out, by taking in the breath and throwing out the breath in a continuous way, you are somehow regulating the prana within. And in the process, you are tuning your prana to the universal prana, which is animating the whole universe, which is the universal prana of the Ishta. And that prana helps you in your spiritual progress, because we have our limitations. We have our prana may have limitations, but the prana of uh, the universal or cosmic being has unlimited power, and it is unlimited in scope. So the whole universe, if we consider the cosmic the cosmic Purusha or the whole Prakriti is a combination of prana and akasha. So also is the human body. Out of akasha, we get the different materials that you feel, see, and out of prana, the various forces. So we have our eyes, we have our ears, we have the particles of blood which take oxygen to different parts of the body. We have the oxygen mechanism where the oxygen which we breathe in goes from the capillaries. You see, such a wonderful system God has made. Even the tree, the last leaf, say a 100 feet high tree, can you imagine the capillary action which takes the drop of water from deep within the ground and it passes through the root in a wonderful capillary motion? It goes up and reaches the last part of the tree. It may be 100 feet high, but the water has that capacity. What what causes this? It is the prana in the tree. As long as the tree is alive, the leaves will be green, because every leaf, every small leaf, tender leaf depends on nutrition and depends on the water which flows through the capillaries. Just as every organ or every single cell of the body depends on the oxygen that we breathe, and that has to go and reach every corner of our body, and it is all done in an automatic way. So that is the importance of prana on the body. So the whole universe, if we consider it as a combination of prana and akasha, from akasha we get the material universe, and prana is the are the various forces in animate as well as inanimate objects, and this throwing out and restraining the prana is what is called as pranayama. So Patanjali says, does not give many directions. Patanjali as such, if you see the Yoga Sutras, he has not given any direction about pranayama. It became a big science in Hatha Yoga later on. But in the beginning, pranayama was not given so much importance because Patanjali thought that just regular breathing, taking in breath, and just breathing in a very harmonious way, in a systematic way, was enough. But other yogis, later traditions, found out various things, and they made a great science which is known as Hatha Yoga. But Patanjali does not give much importance because he doesn't want us to get stuck at that level. He says just throw out the air out, draw it in, hold it for some time, and that's all. The mind will become calm. So his intention is to just use pranayama to calm the mind. That is his goal. Pranayama by itself, controlling the prana or controlling the breath, is not the goal. He doesn't want anybody to go deep into that and then get stuck there. So he says the mind becomes calm, and that helps you in the other steps: dhyana, dharana, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. So he says don't lose sight of the goal, don't lose sight, but use this just to calm your mind, because when you calm the nerves, the reactive mind for some time stops or becomes very calm, becomes very peaceful. Otherwise, there is continuous agitation. Why is that agitation? Why is our reactive mind? Many people ask how to stop the reactive mind. The reactive mind, or manas, which is very close to the pranamaya kosha, it just reacts to the stimulus from outside. People get angry, people feel jealous. There are so many emotions uh, which are uncontrolled in the lower mind. That can be controlled to some extent. There are two ways of controlling it. One through the buddhi, using the higher mind to control the lower. But at the same time, Patanjali says, if you use the prana, which is actually setting your reactive mind into motion and always making it turbulent, that turbulent mind is of no use. It may be very good, that turbulent mind may be very good in the world. It may enhance your worldly prospects. You may be very articulate, you may quarrel, you may fight, you may do many things with that turbulent mind. But definitely, uh, you can't become a yogi with the help of that. Calmness is the first condition, serenity of the mind. That is prashanta chitta, as they say. Prashanta means quiet chitta. That is the first condition to continue our yoga journey further. Otherwise, we'll get stuck. We may have a highly reactive mind, a very highly articulate by worldly standards. It is a highly reactive and a clever mind, you may say, and a very manipulative mind. That is a much better word rather than clever. Cleverness, real cleverness is to calm down the mind, but we think we are very clever. So when you use the mind to manipulate other people, other things, that is known as, in common parlance, it is known as intelligence. Not the higher intelligence or buddhi, but the lower intelligence of the manas, which develops certain skills, which knows how to articulate, how to get things done. And you may say it is worldly wisdom. You say a person is worldly wise because he knows how to trick other people, how to use his tricks to influence other people. There are a lot of books which are based on these things: how to win friends and influence people. There are so many self-development books which deal with this lower mind, which deals with the reactive mind, and how to control our reactions, how to control our body language, how to be what you are not, just to show the world that I am fine. But that is not the solution. That is just managing the reactionary mind. The reactive mind is managed. That is what management science is all about. Management science teaches you how to manage materials, how to manage your money, how to manage other people, how to cheat them if necessary, and how to create a worldly, sort of atmosphere around you so that you can prosperous in the worldly sense. These are all functions of prana, the annamaya kosha, the body skills, the pranamaya kosha, the energy skills, and then the manomaya kosha, the lower mind. Those skills is what our education teaches us. It teaches us to be good sportsmen. If we are in control of prana and annamaya kosha, we have a tendency to become good sportsmen. You can be an excellent sportsman by knowing how to control the prana, a good footballer, a good cricket player. And the mind also, the reaction time. We train ourselves in such a way that our reactive mind reacts, it's focused on the actions, the kicking of the ball, the football, and all those things. The reaction should be very sharp. The sense organ should be sharp. No doubt it is a skill, but it is at the annamaya kosha and pranamaya kosha level and the manomaya kosha level, because the reactive mind, the sense organs, the nervous energy, everything is managed in such a way that you get optimum output. You become a great footballer, you become a great speaker, and a great art. You can articulate very well, but does it give rise to calmness of mind? That is the question. Patanjali says, by pranayama, by doing all these things, the Hatha yoga and other things, you may enhance the quality of your life. But that's all. After that, to make further progress, to go further, to make subtle progress, you have to go to the buddhi level or the vijnanamaya kosha. So, Swamiji now is trying to explain, because the sutra is there, he cannot just bypass it. So he is telling a little repetition or a little focusing on the prana, the breath, if it helps in whichever way, do it, either through japa or through just regular breathing, or to just plain relaxation or mindfulness as it is known. Because the Buddhists do not believe in japa and the repetition of the holy name. They resort to mindfulness. They just observe the thoughts, and when the thoughts become less, the prana also automatically, there is pranayama takes place when you are doing awareness meditation, mindfulness, and there are so many hundreds of Buddhist meditation techniques which enable this. But the real purpose to do all these meditations, as the Buddhists have taught, or the Hindu traditions or yoga has taught, they are all to calm down the mind. They are not to enhance the skills of the mind, which modern education does. So here Swamiji says, you have to remember what pranayama does to you. What does breath? Why is it so significant? So Swamiji says, first you should remember that prana is not the breath. One of the prana is control of the breath. It is not breath per se, but it is the control of the breath. The nervous energy that controls the breath is prana. It's not just breathing. It's not just the air that we take in or the air that we'll take out of the nostrils from the lungs. It's not that. That is just the output that we see. But the real control is controlling the nerve forces which pump the lungs. We decide that now we will breathe in for 10 seconds. So we use our will. We don't allow the breathing to take place naturally. Then it will be not pranayama. We are just breathing anyway. Even if we don't think of breathing, we are breathing anyway. Irregularly we are breathing. But when you make it regular, then the nervous energy which is responsible for breathing, the vitality of the breath, which is known as also prana, is controlled by this vyana, the nervous forces. So the vyana is also comes into picture. Then as a result of that, even the blood circulation, That's why they say the blood pressure, everything can be controlled by this. Automatically, all the pranas follow. If you control one prana, all the others fall in line and they become regulated. So, the word prana is used for all the five senses also. We see certain things, we hear certain things, we hear music. If you hear harmonious music, that also can give rise to pranayama. If we smell something beautiful through the nose smelling is also a sense, tasting is also a sense, hearing is also a sense, seeing things is also a sense, touching certain things is also a sense organ. So that is why we use this aromas and all the thing, because some people are very sensitive to smell, some people are very sensitive to sight. That's why they want pleasing sights. They can meditate better when they meditate on a holy man or they meditate in nature. They just go away from a crowd and just want to sit quietly on the shore of the sea. So they're using the senses. So Swamiji says here, the prana can be controlled by controlling the senses. This we have to remember. So prana is a force. All the sense organs are also helpful in controlling the prana. So also is the mind, because mind is called the prana. This is very important. Don't think prana can work independently of the mind. The mind if influences the prana, and the prana also influences the mind, because mind is a finer form of prana. All the inputs that we get and is conveyed, the reaction that happens, these if they are not regulated, then you can never regulate the thoughts. So we can use the Annamaya Kosha and the control of the Pranamaya Kosha to regulate our Manomaya Kosha. So it, instead of being detrimental to our spiritual progress, the reactionary mind becomes quiet. Like a restless dog, if you take it for a walk, it suddenly it it goes into a certain rhythm. But if you try to control it, keep it inside, it becomes restless. So also our sense organs, because we are forcing it to act against our wish, it becomes restless. There is agitation and the mind becomes restless, prana becomes restless, psychosomatic diseases start, the Annamaya Kosha becomes restless. So the best way of calming, Patanjali found, the best use for pranayama, whether you do it consciously or unconsciously, is to calm down the mind and the body and the senses. So it is, prana is force, because prana is a certain kind of force, not the force that we see in nature. It's not a gross force, it is something subtle, because even thoughts influence it, the nervous energy also influences. Thought is just an expression of that force. So the chitta, here the fourth part of the mind, other than manomaya, the mana and the uh, indriyas, we have a thing known as chitta, the mind stuff. Now it is very important to understand what this mind stuff is. It is nothing but, take the example of a coach, or take the example of a train. There are many coaches. Your breathing is like all these coaches. But there should be an engine which moves the coach. Breathing doesn't take place, or breathing is not controlled by controlling the coaches. There is an engine which can go faster or go slow. So that is our chitta. The chitta portion of the mind, where our samskaras are there. That is why they say, by constant repetition of the holy name, by constant pranayama, by constant practice of yoga, the chitta has to change. That means your engine of the whole body, which is controlled by the chitta, which is controlled by the driver, that is buddhi. Buddhi is the driver, chitta is the engine. So chitta is the mind stuff. It is known as the mind stuff, which draws the prana from surroundings. Now when you go into say satsang, go into a holy atmosphere, it is first the chitta is affected. You say chitta has become peaceful. You don't say the mind doesn't become peaceful immediately. The chitta is the first to, that engine becomes peaceful, and then the whole train, the sense organs, everything follows. it has a tendency to calm down. So chitta draws the prana from the surroundings, the good prana if it wants. It can also draw the bad prana from the surroundings, and then it can get agitated, then it can ruin itself. But if it takes the good prana from the surrounding, and from the surroundings it gets its energy to create all the vital forces, the different vital forces that keeps the body in preservation. Thought is one form of energy which we have to cultivate. We say we cultivate thoughts. What exactly we do is, the chitta takes the energy from outside. We read good books, we do japa, we do spiritual practices. What does it do? It powers the chitta, it powers the engine, so that our thoughts, our will, our other powers of the mind get enhanced. And by the above mentioned process, the pranayama, we can control the various motions of the body as well. Like the engine, definitely the coaches are connected to each other, and the various nerve currents that are running through the body. First, we have to recognize when the chitta becomes calm by regular spiritual practice. What does the chitta do? That power, how it influences the body. That is the goal of the yogi. And then we have to control that. So the yogis found how are the nerve currents affected by our breathing, by the forces that we get through the chitta. That was an object of Patanjali's yoga. The yogis considered, they found by their subtle observation, by years and years of yoga, practice of control of mind, practice of pranayama, practice of asanas, practice of dharana, practice of pratyahara, all the techniques were used, and to observe what exactly happens when you control this prana in the human body. They found that there are three currents. Now this is uh, which we discussed in the last class. The three nerve currents, it is very important to understand this, because these three currents make or break us. Because our entire communication with the world, our entire life, you can say, depends on these nerve currents which are flowing constantly without our being aware. Sometimes we are aware. When we get a nervous breakdown, we understand, oh, I'm getting totally confused, I'm having a breakdown because of excess stress. When there is a problem, then we try to seek a remedy. Otherwise, when we are just uh, mm, busy with our work, we do not understand, or we do not care to study how the nervous currents are flowing up and down the spinal cord, how it is going to the brain. But the yogis fortunately have given us a wonderful description. What happens? There are three nerve currents which are they have classified. Human nervous energy has been classified into three basic nerve currents. And if you see the physiological uh, aspects of the spinal cord, if you take a cross section, Swamiji says there are two parallel spinal columns or cords. They are attached to each other, but there is a hollow between them. If you take a cross section, it forms the shape of 8. And if you see, there is a small hollow. Of course, there is a cerebrospinal fluid. I will come to that later. But as far as physiology is concerned, as far as modern biology is concerned, they are efferent and efferent nerve currents. One conveys the nerve signals from the body and the sense organs to the brain, and immediately it happens very fast. And the other one, which is known as pingala, the ida is the one which takes. So the other nerve uh, uh, the nerve other nerve the other nerve which is running parallel, or maybe you can say attached to the ida, brings the nerve currents or the responses to the stimulus which were taken to the brain, it brings it down and conveys it to the sense organ. Suppose there is a mosquito sitting on your hand, you feel the bite of the mosquito. Then automatically the brain instructs the hand, which is also a sense organ, it is a karmendriya, to just drive away the mosquito because the sensation has reached the brain. But all these things happen in an instant. It's just a reaction which does not require willful thinking. It has become automatic to you. When some hot piece of iron touches you, you just withdraw. The body doesn't have to be told that you withdraw your hand. Automatically, when the heat is conveyed to the brain, immediately there is a reaction and you. So these actions and reactions happen through these two nerve currents which are flowing through the parallel spinal cords, which are known as Ida and Pingala. According to them, or the yogis, Patanjali's yoga, that Pingala is on the right side of the spinal column and Ida is on the left. Suppose we are facing, if we sit on our left side, that is where the heart is, the Ida is on the left and the Pingala is on the right. And in the middle of the spinal column is Sushumna, an empty channel. Empty in the sense it is a hollow, but it is filled with cerebrospinal fluid. That's what they say. And also the cerebrospinal fluid encases or covers the whole spine so that the spinal cords are cushioned inside that. They don't get shocks just to prevent the vibrations of the spine and the body, because these spinal cords are very sensitive things. They should not be. So there is this spinal fluid, cerebrospinal fluid, and they say that this Sushumna, though it is hollow, it is filled with that cerebrospinal fluid. But there is a hollow, there is an empty channel. This the yogis found, because when they studied the physiology of the body, they found what is the use of this hollow canal? Does it serve any function? Why has God created a hollow? God has created these two spines. There is a use for that. But physiologically, at least, we do not know what that hollow does. But that hollow comes into picture only in yoga when you, and the yogis have named it as Sushumna, the empty channel. So Ida is on the left, Pingala is on the right, and Sushumna is in the middle. As it were, the hollow is connecting the two nerves, the spinal nerves, that is Ida and Pingala. And then they branch out to various organs. They reach the brain. They pass through the medulla oblongata, and there are so many things, very complicated nervous system in the brain and also and throughout our body. So these nerve currents are flowing, everybody knows. Every tip of the body, the finger, the skin, everything is connected to the brain, and the efferent and efferent nerve systems, the nerves Ida and Pingala, are constantly working. This has been observed. Ida and Pingala, the functioning of that has been studied in great detail in medical science, and we know how they react. And then there are so many things which we can do, which we can chemically influence the nerve currents. When we give anesthesia, for example, we give spinal anesthesia, we disable the some signals are not conveyed, so you don't feel the pain. So there are so many artificial ways of controlling this nervous currents in the Ida and Pingala. We are very much aware of that, but science does not seem, or medical science cannot explain why that Sushumna is there, why that hollow is there. So, but Swamiji says this Sushumna is empty. In most of the human beings who are not yogis, that Sushumna has gone out of use. When human beings evolved, only a few human beings made their nervous currents pass through this hollow Sushumna. That is what is where we come to the wonderful science of Kundalini Yoga. Kundalini means the nerve currents, when they pass through this hollow, which does not happen in normal people. So if somebody who is very much attached to the world and who is not a yogi, if he says my kundalini has risen, then something is wrong. It is not kundalini, it's just a disturbance of the nervous system. And people read books and then they think because it is very, very difficult unless you practice celibacy, unless you practice brahmacharya, this sushumna does not open. So yogis rule out it may be some disturbance in the Ida and Pingala giving rise to some tingling sensation. And then you may say that my Kundalini, people say there are so many hundreds of books where people are simply cheated in the name of yoga. People say that the Kundalini will rise. We have a course which will enable you to. It's not so easy. It's not child's play that the Sushumna can be opened so easily. Swamiji says it works only in the yogi. What do you mean by yogi? It is not that one who practices yoga is a yogi. Swamiji says you must remember this yoga changes the human body. How does it change? Does it make you more healthy? Does it make you more? Does it give your skin a glow? It may give certain pranayama and good food habits and control of the prana may give you these things. It may improve the functioning of your body, but that is not what the changes Swamiji is referring to. Swamiji says as you go on practicing yoga, I mean Patanjali's yoga, your body changes. What does he mean by body changes? He means that when the yogi follows the rules of Patanjali's yoga, the nerve currents, he somehow learns the technique of passing these nerve currents not through Ida and Pingala, which we are doing. That is why our minds are very reactive. It can just react to external stimulus and then we give a reaction. There's nothing new. Even animals do that. In fact, they do it much better than us. They're so sharp. If you see the deer or if you see some of the animals or see the kite, its eyes are so sharp that things that escape our notice, these people can notice. So that there is no bravery in increasing the capacity of the sense organs. That anyway animals are doing much better than us. In fact, in most of the animals there are some senses which are better than ours. For example, the dog can smell much better than human beings. It can find out objects, it can find out people, it can recognize people through smell. So also the different they say dolphin also is a very intelligent animal. Its sense of sound is so much developed. So the body changes which Swamiji is speaking is not these changes. No doubt the yogi's mind will be sharp. He will be able to, as Holy Mother said once, the falling of a pin sounded like falling of a big object because her mind had become so fine, the sense organs respond immediately. So it causes great pain. We knew that Swami Shankaranandji, when he was in Belur Math, he used to meditate and go into such a high state of meditation that if dogs started barking, somebody had to drive away the dogs. His mind was so sensitive. That is a different kind of sensitivity. That is what Swamiji says, there are bodily changes. What it means is, because of practicing uh, brahmacharya and lot of purity of mind, the body becomes more and more pure, and the nerve currents which normal in a normal human being passes through Ida and Pingala, it requires a medium. It requires a physical medium to transmit current. That doesn't happen in a yogi. Slowly, over a period of time, the sushumna opens. That means currents can flow through the hollow. What's the fun? We have two spinal cords, why not use them? That may be a question. Animals are using it, all the vertebrates are using it, they also have a spinal cord, and human beings, of course, everybody is using it. So what's the fun? Is there any advantage in making the nerve current flow through the sushumna or the hollow? What is the spiritual significance? What benefit is there? That has to be answered. Now, Swamiji gives a wonderful answer. Now, you have to remember this. It is a very rational thing, this yoga. Why passing the nerve currents through the Sushumna makes such a huge difference between an ordinary human being and a yogi. Swamiji says, every time you practice, it creates a new channel through the brain. What does it mean? Human mind, if you see those who are familiar with neurology, uh, neuroscience, you know how the thought process takes place. Every time you think, a channel is created in the brain, the axons and dendrons, the nerve, there are so many billions of, it's a huge network. In fact, it requires a lot of oxygen and nutrition. 25% of the nutrition is taken by the head or the brain, because that is where the nervous activity takes place. Day in and day out, there is a processing going on. It's the heart of the computer, you can say, the main heart of the computer of the human being. So a lot of processing takes place. That's why it requires a lot of nutrition. There's a lot of oxygen also is required, because there's tremendous energy expended there in this thought process. And Swamiji says, take for example, he says, the mind is like a needle. So see the beautiful way he's explaining. And the brain is a substance, soft lump. Say you take a soft lump and take a needle and make grooves. Suppose you are a sculptor, you take some soft clay and take a small needle and then just go on making grooves on that soft clay. Then once you make a groove, then all the things, I mean, once the groove is made, there is a tendency for the thoughts to pass through that groove. So we are making a street. Every time we cultivate some good thoughts, we are making a street, a pathway in the brain. And if we don't continuously think good thoughts, those pathways are closed. So the gray matter which is there in the brain, Swamiji says, comes and makes a lining to keep it separate. Every time, what happens when we do japa over and over and over again? All it does is it creates these grooves, pathways in the brain, wonderful pathways, which provide us escape from tension, escape from all the problems of life, because these pathways have to be kept. Just as when you own a big plot of land, you don't allow weeds to grow. There may be pathways. If you continuously walk on some lawns, pathways are created. But the moment you stop walking, the grass covers it and then you don't know which way you should be going. So also in the brain, Swamiji says, brain is like a soft substance, our chitta, and continuous good thoughts are necessary to keep the channel open. That is what happens when you do pranayama, when you do continuous repeated spiritual practice. Some people asked me, people want variety. Why should this repetition of the name? It's the most boring thing in the universe. Why do repeat? The repetition is emphasized because right now our brains have not created a channel, not created a connection with our Ishta, the divine which is within us. We have to create a channel. We have been lacking focus in life. There are so many pathways that every time we our brain thinks, it goes into this by lanes. It doesn't go on a highway. So we have not created a pathway. So Swamiji says memory is nothing but creating this soft substance in the brain. Every thought which we think creates a channel in the brain, and that channel helps us to think in old ways. So the streets have to be always cleaned. You should not allow garbage to be accumulated, grass to grow on that path. If that happens because of lack of practice, then we can't develop spiritually, make progress, because memory is nothing but constant repetition. How do you develop memory? The chitta becomes familiar with certain things. Now, for example, you are working, uh, many things you are doing automatically. Suppose you are a surgeon. There are many things by constant practice the grooves have become so much that even when you are woken from the sleep and asked to do an operation, you go and just do it, because you are used to it, your nervous system is used to it. You will never take a false step. The more you practice, the more correctly you do a thing. So also here, the memory is nothing, this chitta is nothing, or memory, smriti is nothing but going over these old streets that you have created in the brain. If you do it once, it is not happy. It is not enough. This we have to go again and again, retracing a thought again and again, so that the street becomes broad. So even if we close our eyes, or if we just stop thinking, then again when we resume thinking, it will go through these channels. So that is why Swamiji says, you must have seen in some people that when one talks on the subjects in which one takes a few ideas that are familiar to everyone and combines and recombines them, then it is easy to follow, because these channels are present in everyone's brain. So that's why some people simply lose interest in spirituality, because they have never thought about these things. But if you are familiar, if you are made yourself familiar with these terms, again and again you have to repeat. That is why smriti is important. Repetition or abhyasa, the abhyasa of sadhana is necessary, because these channels have a tendency to be clogged and to get blocked. If we do spiritual practices for a few days, then leave it, then all the pathways are blocked. Then you have to again clear those pathways, then you can start moving. That is why everything is habit. That brain is refuses. There is a typical tendency for a brain to refuse unconsciously to be acted upon new ideas. People don't want new ideas, because the prana is trying to make new channels and brain says no, it resists. That is why people are allergic to new thoughts. They said, let us just follow what everybody is following. Let us make merry, let us earn money. Why should we go and try a new life, yoga and all those things? What will it? Because it's cumbersome. People don't want to do it. A typical example I will give, and then I'll conclude for today. So when people used to go to Sri Krishna, as a result of repeatedly going to Sri Krishna, some people like M felt like going again and again and again. So they had developed a taste. A channel has been created in their mind, and the desire to hear holy thoughts, the desire had been created. When it came for the first time, the channel was not deep. But after persistently come, what happens when you have satsang? What happens when you do namasmarana? What happens when you do repeated spiritual practice? All you are doing is creating channels in the brain, familiar channels, where it is familiar territory, which is the road. The prana has made enough channels, and the brain, whenever it hears good things, it will have a tendency to flow, and then your understanding will be clear. But when people came to Sri Ramakrishna, like M, there were some other people who were allergic to these ideas, because the brain did not have any thoughts or any channels which dealt with spirituality. They had just come accompanying their friends. So the moment they sat with in the presence of Sri Ramakrishna, no matter how good the topic was, how beneficial the topic was, their brain could not take it. So those people said, you sit here, you do satsang, whatever you want. We have not come here to listen to all these things. We will go and sit in the boat, because we have come with you and we have to accompany you back home. We'll go to Calcutta, but we'll spend some time on the boat and making merry. You just be here if you like it, but I can't take it anymore. That is what happens. Why does this happen? Swamiji says, the prana is trying to make new channels in the brain. But unfortunately, as we grow, our brain becomes like Thakur used to say, if the mud is soft, the uh, the pot maker can make different shapes. But once it hardens, then it is difficult to make grooves. So as we grow, our brain becomes resistant to new channels. It can't take up new ideas. That's why Brahmanand used to say, whatever sadhana you have to do it at a younger age, because afterwards the channel you have to put in lot of effort to make these channels, because the mud of the mind has become hard. It is no longer soft. So the more thoughtful a man, the more complicated will be the streets in his brain, and the more easily he will take to new ideas and understand them. So if one is used to these spiritual, that is why they say again and again we have to study the scriptures. We know it. We have read the Gita once or the Upanishads once. But why Abhyasa is said? We have done japa enough. Why should we do again and again? We know what it is, we know the meaning. But the moment you stop, these brain channels, these new channels which the brain is creating, that gets clogged. That is the tendency of the mind. And then new thoughts, you resist all new thoughts, you resist spiritual progress, new things, new higher thoughts. You become incapable of thinking higher thoughts, and you again go back, you regress to your animal nature, because you have been used to a reactionary mind. You said, okay, let me be happy with my reactionary mind. This development of the buddhi, or creating new channels, or forcing the thought waves through the sushumna, is a challenging task. So what happens when the thought currents go, or the nervous currents pass through the sushumna, we'll discuss in the next class. So I take your leave now. If there are some questions, I'll just see the chat. Yeah. So yes, prana as energy, is it the same as shakti? Yeah, it is shakti. If you say from the tantra point of view, tantras don't say prana, but prana shakti, it is the same thing. Any kind of energy is prana, is also shakti. It depends on which system of thought you refer to. Then is prana the same as atman or jiva? No, it is totally different. How can prana be atman? Atman of the jiva is the consciousness which animates the prana. Prana moves because of Atman. The Annamaya Kosha moves because of Atman. The Pranamaya Kosha animates the Annamaya Kosha because of the mind also is not Atman. The Buddhi also is not Atman, though it reflects the consciousness more. So the more subtle we go, the body reflects the least amount of the consciousness. Then we come to prana, which reflects more. Mana reflects a little more. The buddhi reflects more. And then we come to the chitta, the samskaras, the mind stuff, which where these channels are there. The channels which the Swamiji is speaking of. Those channels there, the understanding level, the prana shakti becomes so fine and so subtle and so powerful. The more subtle it is, the more powerful. But still, prana can never be the Atman. Atman is that which is the substratum of everything. That consciousness is never goes. Prana can become strong, can become weak. The body can become strong, become weak. The mind can become strong, become weak. The buddhi can become luminous and can become dark. The buddhi can be subdued. But Atman always is ever resplendent, always shining. The divinity never goes. But unfortunately, we ourselves cover it with more and more grossness, with more and more of worldliness. So that's why so much of purity is purity is nothing but going towards the subtle. Giving up the gross and going towards the subtle is purity. Very simple definition of purity. So we give up Ida and Pingala and go through the Sushumna. That is purity. So that is why for Kundalini to rise in the Sushumna, without purity you can't imagine. If somebody says, I lead an impure life and yet my Kundalini, that means something is wrong. It's not Kundalini. The nerve currents will always flow as long as purity is not there. It will flow through Ida and Pingala only. There may be some signs or some tingling sensations which are nothing to do with Kundalini. Kundalini, when it starts, a person becomes absolutely subtle in his thinking, in his capacity to understand spiritual truths, but that can come as a result of painfully avoiding the gross. Painfully means with lot of effort. One has to subdue the senses, control the senses, and then allow the subtle currents of the nerves to pass through the Sushumna. We'll discuss that in the next class. Can active Sushumna separate or block the emotions and pain travel to the brain? When the nerve currents pass through the Sushumna, it has nothing to do. Thakur demonstrated once that he used to feel pain when the nerve currents were passing through the. It is a very simple logic. This question itself is very simple in the sense, it's common sense that when the nerve currents pass through the Ida and Pingala, you feel the sensation of pain. So what anesthesia does to reduce the pain, you somehow stop those currents, nervous currents, from going to the brain. Not that the pain causing forces are not there. They are there, but you don't feel it. That is a physical way of stopping. But Sri Ramakrishna used to not feel when he went into, he said, you just tell me when you are operating or when you are cleaning the wound. If you remember, once he used to shout in pain if he was not told and somebody tried to clean the wound of the throat. But he said just before doing it, he told Shashi Maharaj that you tell me when you are about to clean, just don't try to do anything without telling me. He used to withdraw the mind. So that means the nerve currents used to pass through the hollow Sushumna, the hollow of the Sushumna, and not through Ida and Pingala. But that is because he could control it. Only few yogis have tremendous control so that they can, without anesthesia, they can get operated. Turiyananji's life, there is an excellent example. A very painful carbuncle was operated upon and he did not feel the pain. He said, just before the operation, you tell me, I will just withdraw the mind. That means withdraw the nervous energy from the, because they have control over the prana. So that is what it means. Okay. If chitta is the engine and buddhi is the driver, buddhi is more important than chitta. No, both are equally important. The driver is useless without the engine and engine is useless without a driver. So don't, I mean, we don't have to compare the two. Chitta is important because that is the storehouse of our samskaras. But good samskaras can be created by buddhi. If we use our buddhi wisely, our chitta will be good. If our chitta is good, our buddhi. So engine and driver, just don't take it literally. Both are important. And some people have conveyed their pranams for Guru Purnima. Actually, Guru Purnima, according to the Vishuddha Siddhanta Almanac, the solar calendar, it is celebrated tomorrow, that is Saturday. So we have two special programs. We'll be putting it on WhatsApp. Two programs in the afternoon tomorrow. One is our regular Gospel of Holy Mother, where we will discuss about the Guru Shakti of Holy Mother. Of course, we will take up the Gospel of Holy Mother conversations, and in the process, we discuss about that. And before that, there is a session which our Scotland study circle is conducting. That is, we have already announced. So, Sri Ramakrishna's Guru Tattva, Sri Ramakrishna and Guru Tattva. What did Sri Ramakrishna tell about the need for a guru? What is who is a guru, and what does a guru do in spiritual life? What is the importance of guru? Guru Tattva means the concept of guru in according to Sri Ramakrishna. That is the topic which we will discuss tomorrow. So I take your leave. Om
Maharaj,
Shanti Shanti Shanti.